Welcome to their Sumter About It. I'm Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter, a New Jersey State Representative. Straight talk about things you care about today in real time with real friends. Today, we're talking about education fatigue. How do we get over it, or are we? With my friend, who is a mom and professional, Melissa Audige-Perkins. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the impact on our students and parents with education fatigue, even post-pandemic. Joining me is my friend Melissa Audige-Perkins, a mom, a wife, and a licensed clinical social worker. Now it's time to welcome Melissa to their Sumter About It. Welcome, Melissa.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's super exciting, and it's happy to see you. It's been a while, but we've been talking.
It has been too long. We've been phone buddies.
Yes.
In a pandemic, with over 20 years having worked together in healthcare systems.
Absolutely, and definitely staying in touch and supporting one another during a really difficult time for everyone that's been alive during this time.
Absolutely. And for those of us making it on the other side, you and I talked about, just the stressors of being a mom, worried about your kids. How long have you been married now?
I've been married 15 years.
Wow, 15 years. Just think I knew you before marriage and before kids. How old are the kids?
My daughter is 9 years old and my son is 7 now. So we got a second grader and a fourth grader.
Ooh-wee, fun times, fun times.
If that's what you want to call it.
So share with us a little bit about, at the height of the pandemic, you're in healthcare, was working in a hospital, and still had to worry about making sure your children were educated, your family was safe during this time. How'd you manage?
Oh, I can definitely tell you it was operating on autopilot. Like you said, I was in a hospital setting, in a COVID hospital. At that time, the hospital was 100% COVID. On a unit with my peers, my nursing peers, my medical peers. And so when you're at work in that type of setting, you're definitely focused on the job, simply because you can't get distracted in order to support and produce outcomes, whatever the needs are. But definitely situating a household in order to make sure my kids are able to log on. My kids have the computer. They're in separate rooms. We had to be flexible. And I think that was the key to transitioning with homeschooling, and just, placing onus on my kids to be flexible.
So flexibility, that's a word. I always like to say, be like the bamboo, bend but don't break.
Bend but don't break. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're in a tense environment, and we know what that was like, because I was also there, where, our behavioral health units, were being converted into COVID units, supporting our nurses and our friends through the mental health fatigue of working every day, wondering if they were bringing something home to the family. So now you get home, you got to play mom, play teacher, review schoolwork to make sure it was done. So your kids were pretty independent, I take it.
No, they had to become independent. And I have to be very transparent. When working in the hospital during COVID, the first thing I did was email the teachers to say, hey, I'm a hospital worker, real time in COVID, assignments may be late. Please help me accommodate my kids, And it's not to say that assignments were always late, but I needed to let them know that I wasn't at home working.
Right.
I needed to let them know that, my kids are having to deal with other elements that are unique to hospital workers. So yes, we did the mom thing with flexibility. If something was due that week, we did it on the weekend if we had to.
Gotcha.
And I found that the teachers were very supportive in that way.
Awesome. So communicate. Is that part of the skill of being a licensed clinical social worker?
That is a skill, because if you don't communicate what your needs are, if you don't communicate what changes are going on in your environment that are impacting your children, then other people don't know how they need to modify how they respond to you. So I think it was very clear from the beginning that we are operating with a different headset.
Absolutely. And then how did you deal with the children and their isolation from their peers? Because they're young.
Yes.
They're young, and now they're independently learning at home in different spaces all day.
Yes.
4 walls, right? No
Yes.
recess and not looking at their other peers to make jokes with.
Correct. So essentially, in terms of when I did come home, I definitely realized how important and how it shifted on me and my husband to be more engaged with them. And I think that's definitely what came out of this experience, that when we were home together, we spent more time playing board games.
Okay.
We spent more time reading, just because they needed interaction.
Right.
They needed interaction. They needed entertainment. And no one was going to the movies. No one was going on play dates.
Right.
So it became a shift in the relationship with them, in being more present as far as their entertainment, their engagement, their socialization.
So tell me, what was the favorite board game of the house?
The favorite board game of the house is Sorry.
Oh.
My kids are very competitive when it came to Sorry.
Okay.
They counted those blocks. So yes. So
and
that
what was the favorite color piece for each of them?
My daughter was red.
Okay.
My son was green, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
Gotcha.
And I was yellow.
Okay.
But definitely, I just found that we just had to be more engaged. My husband became a baker with my daughter.
Fun.
That was not my domain.
Okay.
They baked cakes, they baked cookies, they baked cupcakes, and everybody was happy in that regard.
Great. And, for us, Monopoly was our game because our son was actually studying abroad during the pandemic. We had to rush him home from South Africa, experience of a lifetime. And he was pretty mad at us over this pandemic, as if we created it.
Yes. Like, how dare you bring me home
How dare
to
you
safety?
bring me? Exactly. Could not live on campus. So we really had to reconnect with a 20-plus-year-old who really, was technology savvy. Prior to the pandemic, he was on his phone over 15 hours. Towards the end of the pandemic, it reduced. And I was proud of that fact because I'm like, you got to talk to us. You got to engage with us, but you're 20. Right? So how do we connect? So our game had become Monopoly.
Okay.
And, we still like money and property, right? Utilities is still the way to move.
Absolutely. Build your estate.
That's
your
it.
estate planning.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And our daughter would come home because she was in Albany as well, in quarantine home, worked as a forensic counselor in a hospital in upstate New York, and was doing telehealth to stay connected with her clients. And in fact, I had to pivot our programs to telehealth because we have the outpatient programs. We didn't want the patients destabilized. And we wanted to make sure they had access. How did you find that professional transition from being face-to-face with the patient to moving to remote services with them?
Okay. Well, I had a two-pronged responsibility. So working in the hospital, I was never telehealth.
Okay.
I was on the units with the patients, providing family support on the phone, as they would call, providing a lot of support to my colleagues, face-to-face, in person. And then on the clinical side, in terms of transitioning to telehealth for psychotherapy, really was a shift, but what it provided was a consistency for people who were in isolation. It provided a relationship that many clients relied on to process the anxiety and the fears associated to what was going on in the pandemic. So I had the benefit of having both experiences, remaining face-to-face and also providing the clinical telehealth services.
Awesome. And let's just, talk a little bit about the families. That point was lost. We went to a point where families could not visit. So the hospital staff, direct care workers really became the extension of the families, communicating how a patient was doing to the family. So in some regards, it was a better system of care, if you will, for the totality of the patient and the family. But how did you manage that pivot to really being more than just let's plan discharges, right, and make sure your aftercare is set up to, okay, here's the status, here's what's happening, here's what we're doing?
So essentially, in terms of the clinical updates, the system that I worked in definitely created support in that way. So they had a designated clinical person, meaning a nurse, to provide clinical updates on the progress of the patient, right? And then as, the clinical social worker, providing that support of reassurance of, yes, they are being attended to. Yes, someone has been in the room. And also providing a lot of support for my colleagues. My colleagues are moms, are dads, have families, were struggling with themselves, their family members being sick. So just providing that support as well. So the pivot was really an extension of what we do as social workers, right? Kind of assess what the environment is, assess what the needs are, and plug in the holes by the reassurance that let's focus, let's refocus and challenge what we're fearing versus what we have available to us. So it was an honor to do that, especially when people lean on you to kind of keep their momentum going. So it was definitely a privilege to be among them.
I want to switch to a little bit about the other parts of you and what you do. I know that I've called on you throughout the years of our relationship to support professionals and friends who may be struggling in careers with family, relationship changes, kid transitions, in private practice, to seek out therapy, that it's okay. Because there was a time when it was a stigma. But if you go out to California, everyone has a therapist, and that's in vogue, right?
It's the badge of honor.
It is a badge of honor. But how did you manage your private practice? Did you find that it increased during the pandemic, and you made time for those patients that you were seeing privately as well?
Oh, I definitely saw an increase. One would say that my days were extremely long, just to accommodate the needs of people that needed to process. Definitely an increase with individuals professionally who had significant responsibilities with their role and not feeling 100% in their confidence in being able to execute because they were dealing with home situations and their own fears about what would happen during the pandemic. So I think the increase in psychotherapy is going to be consistent moving forward, simply because I think people are now processing, what am I able to do? What am I willing to do? And what have I done that has not worked for me? So you will see that need for a sounding board just moving forward.
And how do you, best help people work through some of those coping skills? I mean, I'm giving you a big plug here.
Okay. So I best help people by processing what relates to them. Okay. And I say that meaning we live in a world where everything goes. Everyone has a platform, good, bad, or indifferent. Everyone has an opinion, good, bad, or indifferent. But yet individuals are struggling within their lives and have to take a step back to be true to themselves about what they want, what they have available to them, what they can and can't do. So when I work with people, it's really, all right, let's shut out the noise. Because the noise is really mainstream. If you're someone who says, oh, no, I don't have a social media platform, or, oh, no, I don't post on this or that, people are like, oh, you don't? How don't you? Right? So, the whole idea of developing a minimalist type of lifestyle when it comes to who has access to you, what has access to you, and what you want to integrate in your daily life. And recognizing you have a choice.
There you go. There's power, there's control, right? And those day-to-days where I did find pre-pandemic, we felt that we didn't have control. We had to go. And you knew my lifestyle. I was moving fast, but slowing down in the pandemic, breathing, actually enjoying my husband of 24 years. Like, I like you.
Can we have coffee every day?
Right. We can have dinner together. Wow.
Right.
It's okay with me. You're all right. I did well. I chose well.
Yes. Check.
Right, check.
Yeah, no. And I can speak for myself, just professionally pivoting. Going at 150 miles an hour during the pandemic because that was needed, especially being in a medical setting with your friends, your coworkers, and just needing to keep up to be part of a solid team, that required everybody
Yes.
to operate at 150 miles an hour with really not a clarity about what's going on. But, as we slow down with the pandemic, I've realized that you have choices, right?
Yes.
And sometimes slowing down in whatever capacity or minimizing what you say yes to or where you spend your time for the day or for the hour gives you a sense of recharge.
Sure.
And I think that people have realized I don't need to do everything all the time. I am tired.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if I bow out gracefully to this commitment or this engagement, it's okay because like you said, mental health has become the badge of honor. I think it's created an environment where we realize that part of our being, our mental stability is very, very important.
Absolutely.
And how do we self-preserve?
Right. So it's the power of no.
Power of no.
Right. And it's
no, thank you.
It's a full sentence.
Right. No, thank you.
So add the pleasantries that our parents taught us.
Right.
With a thank you at the end. And stick to it.
And stick to it.
Right.
And be okay with it. And, I also think that people, just in terms of work environment, have realized that they don't have to work so much. Right?
Ooh.
We have responsibilities. We all do.
Sure.
We need to do what we need to do to meet our responsibilities. But are there ways that we can modify our decisions so we don't have so many responsibilities?
Right.
Is there a way to modify our time so that we're not always outside of ourselves versus staying connected to ourselves?
Right.
So I'm an advocate for self-preservation.
Awesome. And then, the other piece of this is looking at how people view access to mental health, right? You got them. For those of us who are fortunate, have insurance cards, and on the back is a nice little small number to call for mental health help. There's also a nice thing called Google and all the other search engines where you can put in counselor and everything pops up. Do you have any opinion or evaluation on whether the online counseling or coaching is an option as opposed to seeking out a licensed clinical social worker? Like at what point should you seek what?
Okay. So my understanding about coaching is that you are certified in a training, right? Certification, classes, or what have you. And coaching is really a narrow view of reaching a goal. So my understanding of coaching is that it's a change in your behavior to reach a goal. So, you need a coach to get you motivated to start a business, right? So
Right.
what are the steps of starting a business? Or a coach to get you focused on meeting a weight loss goal or a specific narrow goal. Whereas mental health services is really more of a large holistic approach from someone who's been licensed education-wise, not a certification, but an education which requires licensure and testing to be more of a healing process. So those are the differences, I would think, if we talk about a coach versus a mental health professional.
And part of that healing process is coming to some acceptance.
Absolutely.
Right? Identification, being able to articulate it, and knowing that it's resolved and leaving it there.
Right. So finding the language. I think a lot of people have been just operating and hurting and suffering.
Right.
And I definitely feel that when people were removed from their distractions of being able to run to the supermarket, go out for drinks or go to the movies and all these distractions outside of your home,
right.
be it's an apartment or a house,
that's right.
You're left with yourself.
That's right. And your thoughts.
And your thoughts. You're left with yourself, your thoughts.
Yes.
And really, how many people checked in on you?
Sure. Good point.
Right?
Good point.
How many people were available to provide resources of a resource that you might have needed?
Sure.
At that time. So definitely, talking about our feelings, talking about how they manifest and how they come out now in the workforce,
right.
Has been a topic that a lot of people have need to process, if that answers your question.
It does. And then I'm thinking, how do we leave people with options?
So,
right?
Yeah. So options, definitely, if you're talking about options to look for support.
Yes.
Right.
Look for support, services.
So I would definitely say that, the mental health landscape has changed in terms of access, has changed in terms of the number of providers available.
Sure.
I know if you're fortunate enough to have an employer, they definitely, a lot of companies offer like EAP, which is employee assistance programming, to provide that inner support. You definitely can reach out to support groups. There are a lot of support groups that are very specific if you use that Google engine to look for a local support group. And even the individual therapy is something that people can definitely seek out in order to have that space for themselves.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what would you like to leave our listeners with? Okay. Being a mom, post-pandemic.
Yep.
Things you do differently now. Being a wife, things you do differently now.
Yep.
And being a professional, things you do differently now.
So what I've learned and what I really hope that people learn post-pandemic is that not everything is necessary. You have choices, right? And I say that even if you change something as small as, let me think of something. I'm not going to take 4 extra shifts at work. And I'm saying extra shifts.
Right.
That extra shift.
Right.
And again, I am not analyzing anyone's economic responsibilities. Right. But what I do have to say that I firmly believe is that if you make small changes, you will realize that you are not necessarily needing to be responsible for as much. You're not necessarily responsible for everybody and everything.
Right.
And that carving out a small change can increase the space for you to have time for yourself.
Right.
I think the pandemic definitely showed us that we could do with less, right? Less time out, less spending, right? How much money did many of us save?
Sure.
Not shopping or spending mindless time in areas that would cost us, right? So how do we reinvest in ourselves? Be it time for a walk, talking, giving yourself permission to have support.
Love it. Love it. And I've taken advantage of just about all of those choices.
There you go.
Right. In the pandemic, walking, physical fitness, mindfulness, right? Smelling the roses while we're here, looking at the cherry blossoms as they bloom, some basic gardening. Maybe you'll get to baking.
No. You see this burn right here? This is from the toaster oven.
I was going to ask, but...
It's a big burn. It's from the toaster oven. So I will take you on a walk. Okay. I will order you food, but I will not cook it or bake.
And of course, have some ice cream, right?
Have some ice cream. Yes. But definitely we have choices and enjoy what's available to you, what's around you.
Absolutely. So you heard it here first, Melissa sharing that there's choices, make small changes in your life, enjoy your time, be very specific about your time, and no thank you, complete sentence. Don't need to go further. Thanks for listening to There's Sumter About It. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to. Stay tuned for the next episode of There's Sumter About It.
There's Sumter About It, a podcast from WBGO Studios. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to wbgo.org/studios. Associate producer, Regina Wilder. Produced by Jamara Wakefield. Engineered by Corey Goldberg. Executive produced by Billy Robinson.